Okay, and here we are at Title 14 and Title 15 code updates, and we have two more people joining our panel, so thanks for your patience.
All right, so I'm not presenting this one either, but I am going to have Victoria present for Title 14 and Title 15 code changes.
Good morning, Council. My name is Victoria Abram. Good morning, Council. My name is Victoria Abram. I'm a program coordinator in the Building Safety Department. I'm presenting today the Title 14 and Title 15 code updates. They have very minor changes. Our goal of this is to correct some Scrivener's errors, update some outdated code references, minor changes to the language. Next slide, please. So the background, our minimum code standards are first adopted at the international level. Actually, the building codes are adopted by the created by the International Code Council and then adopted at a state level per RCW, I think 1927. These code cycles are updated every 3 years. The counties and cities are in charge of locally enforcing those building codes. The 2021 Washington State Building Codes became effective on March 14th of 2024. Building code cycles are updated typically every 3 years. Currently, our Clark County Code Title 14 and 15 reference the 2015 building code cycle. Our efforts to update the codes by reference would eliminate the need of having the specific code year cycle in our code. Instead, it would reference current. This would eliminate the need to update these specific code years every 3 years. Next slide, please. For a little background, our two sections of Title 14 that we will be focusing on for the building codes are related to the International Building Code as well as the International Residential Code. The International Building Code provides comprehensive regulations for commercial and some residential buildings, while the International Residential Code specifically addresses residential requirements for residential buildings. Next slide, please. Our purpose of this work session today is for the adoption of a current code cycle rather than adopting the specific code cycle year. The revision of Title 14 to reflect only the sections that Clark County has identified as more restrictive than the current Washington State amended building codes. There's also going to be Title 15 recommendations, which are in relation to only the fire code. Those Title 15 has very minor changes, and we are recommending to keep them all amendments as they are. And then we will also be updating the code chapters and sections referenced in Title 14 and 15 that correlate to the international code books. By revising the code in this manner, we're hoping to have a streamlined and more clear and efficient reference for stakeholders, so they will be able to reference the building codes and on the ICC website, and they'd be more in line with our standards.
I think we have a question, Councilor Young.
Yes, with number 2 there,
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify. So where our language is more restrictive than state, we are reducing the restrictions? Is that what that's saying?
We have amendments that a previous council had said where they want to have differences from the Washington State Code, which is in essence the International Building Code. A really good example of that is ag buildings. This council has decided that ag buildings don't need a permit. They just need this very small permit exemption. So we're not there. She has a couple of recommendations of things they want to change, but only because we don't use them, and they haven't been used. But most of the amendments, like the ag, we are not bringing forth to change. Those were just changes that a previous council had said they wanted outside of Title 14. And then just so you know too, so Title 14, 15, even though our Clark County Code says that the most recently adopted is 2015, the Washington State Building Code says we have to regulate to their code, regardless of what our adoption is. So we are regulating to the current Washington State Code. We just would like to change Title 14 and 15 to say that we're adopting by reference to the state code and not say we're adopting by reference 2015, just to take the year out of it, because the Washington State Code says that's what we have to regulate to anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay. For Title 14, our three main sections that we'll be focusing on having rewritten slightly is 1401, 1405, which is the International Building Code, and then the 1406, which is Clark County Residential Code. Next slide, please. So Title 1401, this is where the specific year is reflected in our Title 14 code. This is where we would recommend removing the specific year and referencing the current International Building Code book as opposed to the 2015 edition. So I've listed out just the Title 1401 with the current and then the strike information that we would like to strike. Next slide, please. This is continued for the International Mechanical Code, the Fire Code, Plumbing Code, International Field Glass Code, and then next slide, please. And then that would be our two last remaining changes for the adoption by reference to the current codes. Next slide, please. We would also like to recommend adding links to the Washington State Amended Building Codes and International Code Council. This would give our customers a quick link to find the codes. Oh. Here we have a few of the language that we'd like to exempt for this 1405, which is revisions to the Clark County International Building Code. This exemption is not listed in the International Building Code, so we would like to strike this from our exemptions from a permit, and we would like to reserve this, and so that way we won't have to rename or renumber the exemptions after this one.
And this is one where we don't use this. We haven't used this in like over 6 years. Okay.
For section 1405 in relation to fees, this is a great example of how we would need to update the outdated reference. It references section 108 of the International Building Code. Their International Building Code book actually would be section 109 for fees now. So we're just going to update the references there throughout Title 14 and 15. For the fees, we recommend striking the second half of this paragraph, provided that payment of the portion of the fee attributable to valuation of an automatic fire extinguishing system shall be deferred until submittal of plans and issuance of a separate permit for such system. This is something that is not listed in the IBC, and also the fire extinguishers are a separate permit and we do not defer the payment. For basic wind speed for the International Building Code, we will recommend to strike the outdated 105 miles per hour, and we recommend updating that to 135 miles per hour.
Just real quick on that one, is that, I know just enough about this to get me into trouble here, but with the wind speed, is that, does International Building Code have different areas geographically because we're all affected by wind differently? So is that, that's not us adopting like hurricane level requirements or anything, is that?
And could you identify yourself, please?
Am I there, Ned? Here? Okay, I'm Michelle Finley, Building Plan Review Manager. I've been with Clark County, I'm just going to give you a little background, for 30 years almost. So I've been with the building department that long. So the background on this is that we've been doing 135 miles ultimate probably since the 2015 code. Our last building official went with the most restricted throughout Clark County. And so instead of doing it per address, when people wanted to know what their design criteria was, we just went with all of Clark County instead of site specific. So now we do have the access for people, if they needed to or wanted to prove that they're outside of the 135 ultimate, they can go on the ASCE website and they can actually do a location to see if they do meet the high wind speed or if they can go down to the basic.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Another change that we would have we would recommend would be to update the snow loads in addition to the wind speeds. The outdated was 25 pounds per square foot, and we would like to recommend updating that to 30 pounds per square foot. This goes with the same with the wind speed conversion. This is something we've been enforcing.
This one is code.
This one is-
This one is IBC, ICC. approved.
So in this case, it would match the IBC.
Is it similar to where it's geographically, it differentiates? So it's the same for everywhere? And I don't know relatively, I mean, 30 pounds per square foot, I don't really know what that equivalates. How many inches of snow is that? It depends on the slope and everything.
That's why we have a structural engineer.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Okay. Please go ahead.
Okay, so here we've moved over to the International Residential Code, which is focused mainly more on residential buildings as opposed to the commercial side of things. For work exempt for permit, we recommend adding fences not over 7 feet high, as this matches the International Residential Code. We would also recommend striking the following exemption not in the IRC. This is very similar to the same exemption that is not listed in the IBC. We would also recommend reserving number 10, so we would not have to renumber the remaining numbers.
Sorry to have so many questions, but this is my wheelhouse. So this, is this, if I'm understanding this correctly, like currently you do not need a permit for modifications that you don't, create any structural changes at all. So is this essentially by striking it, saying that if you put new countertops in your house, you need to, that you're not exempt?
No, there's actually a separate exemption for countering, replacing countertops, tiling, any of that would exempt that from a building permit. This is a general exemption that we've had, but we haven't utilized it in the permit center to my knowledge.
So I'm curious though, is the reason that it hasn't been used because simply people just don't come into the building office because they know that they're exempt from it? I'm curious, what the need is for striking it.
I think really nothing can really, I don't think anything's going to be under $1,500. You're doing any cosmetics you don't need a permit for. And
Okay, so it doesn't change that.
it doesn't really change anything. It's based on fair market value. You can't say your neighbor's going to build it for you, so it's free at the woods being donated. So it's basically on fair market value.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
For the site addresses for the part of the International Residential Code, really the section was just revised with some clarifying language to match the IB or the IRC. The additional language we've highlighted in green for easy identification. The main change for this one would be adding the stroke width of not less than 0.5 of an inch. That would be new language for our Clark County Code, but that is a match to the International Residential Code. Next slide, please. This is a International Residential Code for the wind speed conversion. There is a typo on this slide. It does not strike out the 105 miles per hour. It should be struck to show 135 miles per hour recommended. This will also, even though it states it's for the residential code, it's kind of a double for the International Building Code as well. Next slide, please. So that was all of the main changes for Title 14. There will be, once we have the proposed ordinance drafted up with all that, there will be the changes that you'll be able to see for the updated references. But for the code language, those were the main changes that we had. For Title 15, fire prevention, the two main sections that we were focusing on is Clark County Fire Code and the Wildland Urban Interface Intermix Ordinance. Next slide, please. For Title 1512 Clark County Fire Code, we are recommending to keep all amendments the same. There will not be any changes, and the same would go for 1513 for the Wildland Urban Interface Intermix Ordinance. There will be the updated code chapters and sections referenced in Title 15 to the International Fire Code book. And that is our presentation for today. We are hoping to gain your approval to move forward with the process. I do know that we had some next steps, which it looks like I might have forgot that slide on there. We will be preparing the preliminary draft updates. And then once we have the approval to move forward, we'll also work with legal for review of the updates. And I will also need to file for a CEPL review. And then we will return to council for adoption, hopefully.
And Title 14 and 15 are unlike Title 40 as they don't have to go to the Planning Commission. So once she's drafted, it'll come back to you in a public hearing.
Great. Are there any questions? I think proceed with your next steps and we'll look forward to the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our work sessions, and without objection, we'll adjourn.